Welcome into Denton's office, your favorite commanders YouTube show. If this is your first time watching, be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel. You can follow me on Twitter at the Denton Day. I'm concerned about Jayden Daniels, not just because of the knee injury, but I'm concerned that the knee injury could potentially be a small sign of regression for him at quarterback. So the knee injury, we don't know how that's going to play out, right? Optimistically, maybe it heals and he's good to go by Sunday, but you should be worried because the offensive line hasn't looked particularly good and he's been getting hit a lot, like 29 times in 2 games, which leads the NFL in a 2 game span. That is not good. And yes, they played good defenses. The Giants' defensive line is a very good defensive line. The Packers are a championship level defensive line, but still, your quarterback getting hit 29 times in 2 games is bad. You do not want that. And the reason why I'm a little bit concerned about this is because it feels like at times there's more of a tucking and running scenario going on with Jayden Daniels than there should be. We had expectations entering his second year that he was going to make really positive strides in terms of the way that he views the field, the way that he reads, and the windows that he is able to throw into. And the windows that he's able to throw into, I think that's kind of where the problem is. Because I was watching the all 22 of the Green Bay game. And look, I'm not like a film breakdown guy, right? But I have 4 eyes, I can use them. I'm watching the game against Green Bay, and I'm looking specifically at Terry because one of my biggest questions in the first 2 weeks is like, where is the $96 million, up to $96 million wide receiver? And I was horrified when I was watching the game and realized he's open because I thought he wasn't. I thought in the first 2 games that Terry just was not able to get separation because he wasn't in football shape. And then I'm watching the all 22 before I know anything about this knee injury. Not that it really, the knee injury was late in the game. And some of the stuff that I was really honing in on was in the beginning of the game. And Terry's open. He's not wide open. He's not running butt naked across the field open, but he is open in windows that Jayden felt like he was comfortable throwing into in 2024. And for whatever the reason was, it could be the chemistry thing because Terry wasn't here. There could be a litany of different reasons. But what happened was he wasn't throwing to him. So Terry was open and he just was not getting the football. And that to me is a much more negative sign than the injury right now. I think the injury is more of a result of the regression in not throwing into some of the windows, maybe not being 100% comfortable with Terry. And Terry is just the example here. It's not like I was looking at every single wide receiver. I do think there are some things that Cliff Kingsbury could do significantly better, like maybe not throwing to Jalen Lane on a slant. Like we're on Twitter. We get it, right? There are some things that everybody could be doing better, but I am concerned that maybe this is a small sign of regression. And something that we kind of looked at as maybe a bit more of a positive in the preseason was actually not positive, and that's the fact that they didn't throw in the preseason. When that happened, it was like, well, they just went 4 plays, marched right down the field. This offense is going to be just as good. Everything is good, fine, and dandy. Let's get on to the regular season without the quarterback getting hurt. And I was part of that mindset. I almost called it propaganda. It wasn't really propaganda, but I was part of that mindset. I was like, hey, if you're just going to march down the field in 4 plays, things are clearly going really, really well. You don't need to throw. Now, 2 weeks after the fact, that could have been a larger issue going on here, that either he wasn't comfortable or just the receivers were not very good at getting open. And I do think there was a little bit of the latter that could be, highlighted there. But in the first 2 games, specifically in the direction of Terry McLaurin, there are opportunities to get the ball to your great players, and they're not being taken advantage of. And what I do not want to see is that Jayden regresses to just the tucking and running because I know that I can. Him being able to is a very nice luxury to have offensively. And it is something that you can use to strike fear in the heart of defenses. But the objective should be to throw the football because he has the talent to be just as good at throwing the football as he does at running the football. The reason we called him a top 5 quarterback this offseason was not because he's really good at running. It's because he has that ability to run in a very similar way to Lamar Jackson, but he also can make all of the throws. And in the first 2 weeks, he has not been making all of the throws. So I'm worried about that. And there needs to be a conversation within the walls of the facility to say, hey, you need to fire the football away. He was very similar to the beginning of last year. He went X amount of games, was it? 4 or 5 games without throwing an interception, which was fantastic because it means he's not turning the football over. But it did feel like at the end of that section of the season, that he was not taking risks, that he was not pushing the ball in the fear that he was going to turn the football over. And I'm not asking for him to start throwing, 50-50 balls. I'm not asking him to throw into triple coverage here, but I do want him to feel more comfortable throwing into tight windows. You're going to see tight windows. This is what comes with the elevation of the talent in the conference. Green Bay is a great example of that. It's very easy to push back and say, well, Denton, Green Bay is a championship level defense. And that's accurate. They are. I was texting friends of mine that work in that market, and I said, y'all got a team, man. Like that defense, now it's not just Michael Parsons, the defensive secondary, really, really good. Like that's a championship level defense. The problem is that this is supposed to be a championship level offense. And right now it's not there yet. And I think the injury is a result of that because Jayden is tucking and running. I don't want to see any games with 16 carries. Not that we've seen that already, but the games with 16 carries meant that nothing else was working and Jayden had to go Superman mode. I don't want to see Jayden go Superman mode. I thought the goal in year number 2 was to take all of that off of his plate so he doesn't have to. That means running the football more with Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt now because Eckler's not going to be available. You can't go a Thursday night game against a championship level defense a quarter and a half before you give your running back a legitimate shot at carrying the football and getting the run game. That's too late. That's too late. That looks more like Eric Bieniemy style offenses when he's dropping guys back 60 damn times than it does what Cliff Kingsbury was doing last year. You have to get the running game more involved in the run game that is not number 5. Part of this is also because we saw across the conference, or I guess across the aisle of the conferences, if you will, in the AFC with what's happening to Joe Burrow. And Joe Burrow is very similar to Jayden in the extent where he had this in his year number 2. Jayden was obviously year number 1, but in year number 2 for Joe Burrow, he had this like massive year, gets to the Super Bowl, and everyone thinks this is just going to be what the Cincinnati Bengals are for the rest of Joe Burrow's time here. Joe Burrow sat at a press conference and said, "I am the championship window," and to the extent like Jayden is the championship window here in DC, at least the way that the team is currently constructed. But if you look at the way that Joe Burrow's career has played out after that particular season, he had a year where he was hurt, and then he was healthy, and then he was hurt. And it's like this back and forth, 1 year on, 1 year off kind of a deal. And thankfully, like it doesn't look like Jayden's going to miss a substantial amount of time, but we'd really like to not have him fall into that suit. So that comes with the offensive line. They have to do their job better. That's an everybody thing. It's not just a Connerly thing, although he is the main kind of focus here because, hey, he's getting beat a lot. And if they know that you're a weakness on that side, I know he didn't play right tackle in college, and that's fine, but you have to protect your quarterback. You were drafted to protect the quarterback. And if you cannot do that right now, there needs to be some sort of adjustment made. And I prefer that adjustment to not be like lining up a running back at the line of scrimmage to just have him shoulder check a guy. If you're going to use a running back in pass protection help, I'd at least like him to get ahead of steam, which, we saw McNichols line up as like a tight end and chip Micah Parsons. Well, that's not doing much. You're kind of side checking him, and Micah Parsons is just using that side check as momentum to then get around him. Whereas if you're coming from the backfield and you can get ahead of steam and smack him face to face, it'll work a little bit better there. So it's not just a Jayden thing. Like I want to make that very, very clear. But I am worried that this injury is a result more so of not being comfortable making throws that he was at the end of last year, not just like this, offensive line sucks, Cliff sucks kind of a deal here. I'm curious as to your thoughts. You can let me know down below in the comments section or hit me up on Twitter at the Denton Day. This has been Denton's Office. I appreciate you coming in. Now, respectfully, get out.